Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pull Me Out of This. This is our fourth chapter of the speaker series by Sam. I'm Alice Ye, head of career at Sam, and I'm joined here with Jessica Galica. And I'm so excited because our topic today is about pivots, career pivots, downshifts, and possibilities. Why it's time to let go to get ahead. And just a quick introduction to Jessica. She is an executive coach and the best-selling author of Leap: Why It's Time to Let Go to Get Ahead in Your Career. Before pivoting, Jess built a successful 15-year corporate career in tech and management consulting at some of the world's most prestigious companies like Apple, Bain, and Simmons. Today, Jess coaches leaders with a strong focus on women to help them successfully navigate careers in business and tech and reach their fullest potential. So excited to have her here to talk about career pivots. And as we have our conversation here, for those of you in the audience, feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we'll try to get to those throughout the conversation. Otherwise, we'll save some time at the end for some Q&A. And so right now, this topic of career pivots is really important. It's a very relevant. It's really relevant given current times. It's a very tough job market out there. People are laid off. They've been unemployed for quite some time. People are facing the threat of layoffs. And so a lot of people are really thinking about the idea of career pivots and considering what that really means to potentially let go. And so just in the title of your book, you reference letting go. What are you really talking about there when you're talking about letting go when it comes to embracing career change?
Yeah. Well, and first I'll echo what you said, Alice, right? Which is we're in this interesting moment where possibilities and pivots are not only things that women are choosing, but are some things that women are navigating as a result of circumstance. And so, yeah, really glad to be talking about this topic in this moment. And when I say letting go in the book that I wrote, what I really mean is letting go of this notion that there is one singular path to success, just one way to do it. I think for so many women who are in leadership positions in their career, or really at different points, different generations, they've heard this message loud and clear in different ways, whether it's lean in or you can have it all or girl boss. There's this kind of resounding message that, hey, the way to do a career right is to stay in your lane and work harder and keep your head down. And so letting go is really letting go of that idea and finding the bravery to be open to the fact that, hey, we all get to define the track that we want and get to define what success means for us. And the second part of the subtitle is about getting ahead. And I love the book for this reason. When we say letting go, there's sometimes this assumption that it means falling behind. But the book profiles the stories of so many women who took risks, made pivots, opened up new possibilities, and that actually launched them ahead. And both in terms of really traditional success metrics and also in terms of how they kind of view their whole portfolio of life and success across every realm of their world.
And for when it comes to letting go, there's a lot of people who say it's really hard to let go. And why do you think people find it hard to let go? And what are some ways to help with that notion of letting go?
Yeah, it is really hard. And I think it's because of all of the emotional attachments that we have. The path that's been sort of proposed to us or served up to us is compelling in a way and feels safe and secure. And it can be really scary to step away from that sense of security and stability. I encourage women to kind of get over this, so to speak, in two ways, right? And one is really a mindset thing. We are wired to focus on the risks related to decisions and the downsides. And so I know without even talking to anyone that if they're considering, some type of pivot, like they have asked themselves, what if this wildly fails? What if this doesn't work out? But usually women need coaching on creating space for the land of the upside and the land of possibility. So balancing out that what if this wildly failed with also asking what if this wildly succeeds. So part of it is simply that mindset shift of coaching yourself through this thing that feels really scary. And then action is a really great tool as well. So fear doesn't do great in a place of action. And so I always encourage women take a step. And often those steps are really incremental. I talk a lot about testing and learning in the book. It doesn't need to be a big, dramatic, swift, in one moment, life-changing decision. Really, for most women, these types of, possibilities, shifts, changes come down to really incremental, kind of 2 to 5% shifts that they're creating over time. So those are the two things that can help, right? The two kind of antidotes to the fear is shifting that mindset and then getting into this place of action.
Yeah, what you brought up about shifting that mindset is so critical. I know we oftentimes focus on the negative, and it's our brain's way of telling us or trying to protect ourselves. So we always think about what if it goes horribly wrong. But I like what you said in terms of thinking about the opposite. What if it goes amazingly well? And so I think a lot of people oftentimes forget to think about that.
Yeah, agreed. And listen, like there's space for thinking about the risks too. You should be evaluating those risks. We just need that urge, that little push to also be looking at the other side of the equation.
Absolutely. And so when women are thinking about their careers and trying to find fulfillment as they are thinking about career pivots and this notion of getting ahead, what do you think people are looking or women are looking for when it comes to finding fulfillment, especially for those who are in their mid or late career where for most people they've been following a certain path for quite some time and now they're facing this idea of a career pivot and it may be the first time they're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll share what I hear most often. And this could be a great place where I'd love to, Alice, if you can glance at the comments or anyone, wants to share their perspective too. What I hear the most is that, especially sort of mid or later career, women are really prioritizing aligning their career with their values and how they want to contribute. There is often this shift into like, what do I want the legacy? What do I want, what do I want my career to really be about from a kind of contribution, impact, and values perspective? I think women also really want to be around good people. There's an extreme desire to be working alongside great people who, where they can really show up as they are. And I do think that flexibility is still really important, right? In that mid or late stage of career, oftentimes there's, that time collides with major caregiving responsibilities, whether that's as a parent or for aging parents. And so I think there's this desire to have a career that also can fit into their broader life. And then women, also there's an element of growth and personal growth too, right? Like women aren't always in my experience, not looking for easy. They really still want to be challenged and grow. So that's what I hear most often.
Yeah, I love what one of our audience members, Joanna. She said, "My aunt said to me years ago, and I found it very profound. Everything in life except having children is reversible." And I love that idea because it applies to careers too. It's where I think people are stuck sometimes feeling stuck in this idea that they picked a path and they're stuck on it forever, but it's reversible. It's changeable.
Yeah,
And
totally. And I'm
yeah.
glancing, I was able to glance at Heidi's comment around, passion. And I think that's a great, another word for how I'm thinking about values and contribution. There's this shift to really, picking your head up and thinking about at that bigger level, like, what do I want career to really mean and create in my life and in the world?
Yeah, and so when it comes to career, women, especially those, many of us who are very ambitious and high achieving, we want to be able to find the fulfillment and the purpose while balancing the needs of motherhood or caregiving or all these other responsibilities that we have. And so that need for flexibility, how do you think women can really balance the ambition to match with the flexibility they need around their career?
Yeah, I'll say a few things here. I think one of the most important things is getting really clear and really accurate on what you need and what you want. I think so many women can relate to the experience of like the pain or the discomfort or the realization that this is not working, right? This balance is not being achieved. That's really, really evident and kind of smacks you in the face. But that next step that's really important to take that not all women are taking is then getting really, really clear on, so what does this mean? What do I need? What do I want? And being very specific about, the changes that you want to make. Without that clarity, it's really, really hard to feel confident about decisions and choices and trade-offs that you're making. So that clarity is super, super key to get really clear and really accurate on upfront. And, then, yeah, it might mean making some changes either within your work environment, looking for, flexible options, looking at career beyond just traditional career progression. It also might mean changes outside of work. So looking for ways to get more support, through paid supports, through family networks that can support you. But that clarity piece I find is super, super key. And it sounds so obvious and sometimes is overlooked.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so one of the first questions that came to mind when you were talking about career clarity, and I think that's a big area that women, when they are thinking about career change, that's where they feel quite stuck because they've only known this one path, and so it's hard to get clear on what to do next because you only know what you know. And so, what do you see as how or ideas on how to get clarity on what's possible or what's next?
Yeah, two things that I think are really important. And the first I can say with so much confidence is that in almost all cases, you know more than you are telling yourself. I think that we all have an inner wisdom and an inner understanding of who we are and what matters to us. And that voice has been often buried or the volume has been turned down. And so it takes a lot of work to kind of uncover that and turn the volume back up. And, I can say with almost certainty, for people who feel like I have no idea what to do, you know more than you're telling yourself. Now, the second thing I think I'll come back to again is action. Action can be so helpful, especially when you're feeling stuck or unclear. So testing things out, finding really small, low risk ways to experiment and to take steps is, you can get clarity. If the sort of self-reflection isn't working, you can also get clarity through action and exploration too.
Yeah, I love that idea. I know from my own personal experience, finding that clarity through action has been one of the ways to get that clarity is to test it out a little bit or take, like you said, take little steps to uncover more information in order to uncover that clarity. And so going back to what you were talking about when it comes to embracing and change and in taking action, what do you see as the benefits for career pivots in terms of why do you think it's essential?
Mm. I think it's essential because it's just part of the modern career trajectory and economy. And give me a second just to take a sip of water. I've got a little cough here. But yeah, I think it's so essential because there's just no way to avoid it, right? So even Alice, like you were setting the stage at the beginning, changes are required, right? Because of choice, yes, strategic choice, but also because of circumstance, right? We're here in a position where so many women are having to navigate big changes because of layoffs, because of a market economy. So it's essential because there's kind of, and increasingly more and more, there's like no way around it. And so you want this to be something that you can navigate really strategically, navigate with confidence, navigate well, and be part of, make it something that can become kind of a launching pad or a strategic advantage as opposed to something that really holds you back. So yeah, it's essential because we're all going to encounter it, whether we like it or not, if there's a lot of, career trajectory ahead of us. And so really mastering the art of getting comfortable and embracing it is the best way to kind of be in control.
Yeah, I love this comment here from Joanna. She's saying sometimes we plan and plan and plan, and sometimes we just have to take that leap and just try it. And Christina talks about trying it on like trying on an outfit to see if it fits. So love all these ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, how fun. That's a great analogy, Christina. I love that too.
All right. Let's see. So Melissa asked an interesting question here. How does imposter syndrome factor into taking a leap after knowing a strong career and the stability that comes with that for so long?
Yeah, I think great question, Melissa. I think the, imposter syndrome is another way to name what I described earlier as fear, right? It's that fear that holds us back. Like, well, what if I'm not good enough? And what if this fails? And what if I can't make this transition like I'd like to, or I hope I can, right? So it's really another version of fear. And so I think, the same advice applies that I mentioned before. And then there's lots of other stuff around imposter syndrome too that I think is relevant here, which is that, imposter syndrome is a perception. So it's managing the emotion, but it's not actually making you any more or less likely to succeed in this pivot, right? So there's some confidence gaps between men and women. There aren't really performance gaps in the same way. So I think, acknowledging that, again, it's the mindset shift of really just, knowing, hey, imposter syndrome is in the room, but choosing to continue to move forward with it. And the last thing I'll say is that sometimes with a career change, people see it as this like entire reinvention of who you are and your skill sets. And in reality, it's really not that black and white. There's so many skills, experiences, gifts, talents that Melissa, in whatever transition you make, they go with you, right? So, it's not this clean slate I'm having to completely rebuild. It's really just a transfer of the skills and assets that you have into a new environment and a new challenge.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I totally agree. I was actually about to say that one of the biggest mindset fears that comes into play here is thinking that you're starting over is hard and overwhelming, and the idea of starting over because you have to start over when it comes to career pivots, but it's actually a myth. And like you said, the idea of reinventing our careers, it creates that fear of doubting ourselves, doubting our skills, or even being judged by other people. And so all that discomfort and fears around the idea of starting over, it really comes into place when it comes to career pivots. And I think a lot of that does sometimes stem from imposter syndrome. And so when it comes to this idea of, or thinking about that myth or of starting over, or the imposter syndrome, do you have any ideas or ways that people can make it feel less like it's starting over and more like that's building on your existing experiences and skills?
Yeah. I think it's a continuation of, what I was saying at the end, where it really can be this mindset shift of focusing less on, okay, what am I letting go of? What am I sort of giving up? And really thinking about just what am I building on? What am I adding, right? So all that stuff that I described, right? Your lived experiences, your professional accomplishments, what you're great at, like that all comes with you. And so I think that's the most powerful thing, is just realizing that, it's like the scoreboard doesn't go back to zero when you make a pivot or a shift. All those wins, all those successes, they're still part of your story, and they're still part of how you show up and how you perform. So yeah, really focusing on, that, hey, this is just an extension of me and what I'm doing. It's this new chapter. It's a season in my career. Rather than this like, hey, I'm erasing everything that I've done, or I'm going back to, the very beginning of the race. That's the sort of advice that I would give, or the place that I'd say, like, lean into that energy. What is this building on, as opposed to what am I letting go?
Mm. Yeah. And I think Christina here, yeah, she's talking, Christina, she in the comments, she's talking about how imposter syndrome and self-doubt, it's really changing that mindset and having more self-compassion for yourself, believing that you deserve the vision that you want and the need to be happy. So yeah, it's easy to believe that it's too far-fetched to pivot to a different career and potentially a different life.
Christina, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say, I see this really as what you're describing, Christina, as like this limiting belief, right? That my ceiling is here. This is good. This is the best enough, good enough that I can reach. It's really a limiting belief. And, I think, yeah, what you're inviting people to consider is like, you can create something different for yourself. There may be trade-offs, but you can create something different for yourself. I really, really, really agree with that. I think it's a very valuable thing.
And so Sophia asks a really good question here. When you are facing those fears, sometimes that can really paralyze you and hold you back. And I know we talk a lot about that mindset shift. And so how do you actually move forward when you're stuck in that fear and that mindset? So what do we actually mean when all of us are talking about mindset shifts?
Yeah. Great question. Because I think it's really real, right? Like, it's easy to be like, hey, access this mindset shift. And, I hear you, Sophia, of like, what if I am just feeling way too scared or way too anything to do it? I think this is where having some support system can come in, right? Whether that's, someone you trust in your life who can really talk through these things with you, whether that's, a professional coach. I think having another person, inviting them into that support system, can be really, really valuable. And Sophia, I would be thinking, what is one action that you can take literally today? That's the scale that I would be operating on. What is something that I can do today, in the next 10 minutes? I would be thinking at that level. I would challenge you to think at that level. Take some action. You can do it. And if you get it to the bite size of like, I'm going to do something in the next 10 minutes, you will force a level of creativity and a level of action in yourself that is just going to get the snowball rolling. So I don't know if you're on the line still, if you can chat in, but like, that would be something I would be encouraging you to agree to. Like, okay, tomorrow I will take one action that requires 10 minutes of my time.
And along those lines, when it comes to taking that action or that first step, and I think going back to the people who are stuck in that, that need for clarity and wanting to make change, but they don't know what to do. And so what would you recommend as that first step to that small action that they should take?
Like, literally, what is the action?
Yeah, I think some people are possibly quite curious, or they don't really know what is that first step. What is that first action to take?
I'll give some examples, because I don't know that there is one universal action, because people are in such a wide range of experiences and situations, right? But okay, so for example, right, let's imagine that you are have experienced a layoff, and you are in between jobs, and you are kind of paralyzed by this, right? Which happens to people. Like, there's a deep feeling of questioning of worth. It can be a big hit to confidence. It can be really, really challenging. So in that case, right, one action might be like, hey, I'm going to reach out to one person who may be able to help me, right? Like, I'm going to reach out to an old boss on LinkedIn and send them a quick note like, hey, Joe, thinking of you. It'd be great to catch up one of these days. Are you up for a coffee? That's going to be my action for the day. So that's an example of a really small, it takes 10 minutes, right? Even maybe less than that action that might support someone who's stuck in this kind of layoff experience. Another example might be if you're someone you're employed, but you're feeling like, wow, this is not the path that I want to be on. I feel drawn to these other things. I don't even know what they are. One action might be, I'm going to spend 10 minutes looking on LinkedIn, clicking around at different people's profiles, and I'm going to make a running list of 5 people who I see who pique some interest or curiosity in me. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to, this person stands out to me. Their job looks cool. They seem inspiring. Start making that list of 5 people whose, professional careers feel interesting or inspiring to you. So those are 2 examples in 2 different contexts, right? But it's this bite size, like really might take 10 minutes to do to just get the action moving and kind of, this snowball effect.
Yeah, thanks for those recommendations, and totally agree that sometimes the obvious things, or what can seem obvious, are probably the obvious things that you can do as the bite-sized actions. All right, so let's see. Let me just take a look at our chat here.
There's a couple of great comments that I'm seeing around imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I love it. And I'm going to share this article. Let's see if I can get to chat. So really here, I let's see, who was it? I think Joanna and Abby. Yeah. Really hear you on the imposter syndrome. And, I use that because it's so ubiquitous. It's so known. People really understand. And I'm with you that I think imposter syndrome, there is like an environmental thing happening, which is there's no performance gap, but women are sort of made to feel like they're not meant to be there. Because they're often in these very male-dominated environments with male-dominated cultures and attitudes. So I'm totally with you, right? That, I think the solution to imposter syndrome is not all about like women shifting mindset, but just really about how can we change that environment. And I'll share right now an article that I think will be interesting for everyone that makes the case to sort of stop talking about imposter syndrome as it relates to women.
Love it. Love that. Yes, I've also heard similar things as well. All right. So when it comes to kind of going back to our conversation around career pivots, and when we were talking a little bit about the idea of when you were actually giving the examples of exploring new possibilities for people who feel like they potentially are feeling stuck but not sure of where to go. If someone wants to explore new career possibilities, how can they think about doing that without potentially jeopardizing their current role if they still are in the job, but they want to make a change, but they don't want to, potentially impact what they're currently doing?
Yeah, I totally get this, right? I mean, most people are in a position where they want and need to maintain that role. So there's this like Hollywood version of a career pivot where you go in on a Friday and you quit your job, and then on Monday you've discovered the next thing, and it just never happens that way, right? And so I think there's plenty of ways to explore, to plant some seeds, to test and learn, to come back to that concept in ways that can still be protective and safe of your existing role and existing employer. This is contextual too, because every environment is really different politically and different in terms of sort of sensitivity to growth opportunities inside and outside of the organization. So that's the first thing, is to kind of assess like what world am I operating in? How open can I be about growth goals that I have with a manager? Are there opportunities within the organization? So you want to understand kind of how anonymous or how open you can be, and really assess that sort of risk level. But there's plenty of ways to do this in a way that doesn't, out you. You can have private networking conversations with people outside of your organization. You can look for just new projects that aren't obvious, like not, hey, manager, I want to, move to another team and take on a project there, but is there a project or something within your scope that starts to kind of inch you closer towards something that you're interested in? Yeah, you can do that self-reflection work, which is totally independent and totally isolated. So I actually think there's quite a bit that you can do. And I would add to that these types of pivots, there are some organizations that are large enough and supportive enough that there's possibility within your organization. And so that is sometimes an overlooked thing too, is could this be something that you can create in the place that you are? And if it is, sometimes that's the easiest and the quickest way to make it happen because you've got, an established reputation and capital and all of that. So yeah, hopefully that helps. I do think there are ways to do it without totally, sticking your neck out and risking your current role.
Yeah, I agree. I think as you said, underappreciated or under discussed idea of doing a career pivot within the same company. I think oftentimes when people talk about career pivots, it's this idea of completely burning everything to the ground and starting over and doing something different. But sometimes that change can be within the same company, and those are possible too. And of course, it's you will need to assess if that's an option that you want to consider. But yeah, I agree that sometimes that's an overlooked area of opportunity.
Yeah.
I know we've been talking a lot about the act of change when you want to make a career change or a career pivot, or if you've experienced job loss and now you're forced to consider this idea. For those who may not necessarily have reached that point where it's forced upon you, what are some signs that it's actually time to make a change for those who
Mhm.
may not actually be thinking about it, but maybe they should be?
Yeah. I'll share there's a few signs that I look out for, and I'd love to. This is a great one to hear from people too. Is what has been your sign that it's time to move on if you have made some kind of change. Um, I think there's three things on the watch list from my perspective. The first I would say is this this really persistent dread. If every Sunday, every Monday morning you're waking up and there's a true dread around work, and it's it occurs over a long period, right? We all have weeks and sometimes months where it's just not the best season, and if it's something that feels really really chronic, that's something that I consider something to look out for. The other two, the first is, are you learning? Are you continuing to learn and be challenged in this role? I think it's really important. And the next one is, are you building relationships that will stay with you? So those are the three, I think, most reliable signs. It's like really understanding this level of dread and being honest about it. And then thinking about, am I continuing to learn and am I building relationships that will continue to support me in and beyond this role? And if all three of those are sort of checked boxes in the bad way, to me, that's a strong signal that, it's not a strong signal to go into your office and quit, like you've been saying, Alice, but it's a strong signal that you might be ready for the next thing. And it's time to, plant those seeds and take those signals more seriously.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would actually add I hear this actually quite a lot from my friends where things are not quite that bad, right? It's like they're not happy, but it's tolerable, or it hasn't reached that sense of like, that dread, but it's just not optimal. But yet the idea of the uncertainty is scary. And so you end up just putting up with it and just staying in a particular role or a company, and not make a change because things are okay. And so I would say I agree that if you're not learning or growing, or even if it's okay, what about just thinking about what it could be? And maybe that is a sign that it is time to consider a change, even if things seem okay, but you're just putting up with it, right, versus being really excited or feeling fulfilled. I think these are a lot of things that people think about or are facing, but they don't make a change because they don't think things are that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, Alice, what you're bringing up and what some of the comments are making me think is that, you know, this experience of dread can be a really powerful signal, and it can be confusing to people. They're like, well, how bad does it need to get? Or like, how good should it be? Right? It's sort of this difficult, kind of spectrum to really know, well, where am I? And so I like offering these other two as well, which are a little more neutral. They're not so charged, right? It's just, hey, am I learning? And am I building relationships? So for people who are feeling a little bit like, well, is it good enough? Is it too bad? Right? Then indexing more on the learning and relationships, I think, can be very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Some things here that people are saying is, yeah, when the learning slows down, it's time to pivot. From Melissa, I agree. Definitely agree with that. Uh, Heidi says it's time to leave when your bucket is empty from the job. Yeah, if you're not getting anything out of it, that makes sense. And Christina talks about for those who are dealing with chronic illness or disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If the job is
Yeah.
exacerbating the condition and making you sicker, that's definitely a sign as well.
Yeah. And Christina, it's a great point that brings up this theme of, it's not just about creating the dream job. It's really about creating the dream life, right? That's really what we're all after. And so I think of that when I see your comment, Christina, and that, gosh, wow, when you start, if you might be maximizing for the job, but wow, when you take a look at that, right, of exacerbating chronic illnesses, disabilities, and you zoom out to this dream life perspective, it starts to become a lot clearer.
All right. So in the last few minutes before we kind of open up to more Q&A, so for those of you who have some lingering questions but haven't put them into the chat, please do so. We'll cover them. And so in the last few minutes, kind of what along those lines of thinking about career changes and your advice, what is one strategy that women can use when it comes to reevaluating or redefining their career trajectories?
Yeah, one thing I always love to bring up, and I'm sure many of the attendees here have this phenomenal skill set at planning when it comes to their role in their organization. And I work with lots of really sophisticated, unbelievable, incredible female leaders who they're doing annual planning for their teams. They're setting up metrics for how they'll measure that success. They have, quarterly time dedicated to reviewing that progress and adjusting, right? They're really experts when it comes to this strategic planning in their business role. And even the women who are the best at this, it's really, really rare that they're creating the space and creating that container for, to take that activity and apply it to their own career development and their own personal growth. So that's a strategy that I really recommend, is carving out the space for yourself. It might be like a 90-minute session at the start of a year, the start of a new year, and then having, even 60-minute check-ins every quarter. It's not that much time. But really rarely do I see women creating this pattern and this habit of using that time to plan strategically for themselves. So that's a big thing. And I'll say there's so many different frameworks for planning and, doing this. And I don't think the magic is in the framework. There's plenty of great frameworks out there. The magic is just in creating this space for yourself, prioritizing it, and making it a habit. So that's my one, get on my soapbox, like carve out time for yourself, create this space, create this container to do all of the strategic planning and thinking and reflection as it relates to your own career development.
I love that. I tell everyone I talk to the very same thing, actually, that you are the CEO of your life, your career. So you should act like that. Treat it like you said, have a strategy planning session for your life, for your career. do that reflection to think about your goals and are you meeting them. And so I think a lot of people are oftentimes a passenger in their life versus being in the driver's seat. And so taking back that control and being in control and being that CEO. So love it. I definitely 100% agree with you.
Yeah, and that's a great way to put it, Alice. Being the CEO, being the driver, that's in the driver's seat for sure.
All right. Any other questions? It doesn't look like we have any other questions in the chat. So yeah, so thank you so much, Jess, for being here, for offering your insights and having this conversation with me about career pivots. It's been great to have you. So for those of you who don't know, actually, we have one question that just came in. How do you suggest baby boomers that are making a career transition and not retiring enlighten other generations that they are still viable and can contribute in an impactful way?
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at it too. A couple more were coming in. Great question, Abby. And I want to be clear. So I think what you're saying is, how can baby boomers kind of communicate their value to other generations? Is that right, Abby? Well, hopefully, I think that's right.
I think, yeah.
Oh, this was Allison's question. Okay. Yeah, I think it's a great question, and some of it may matter in terms of kind of industry, what organization you're in, and all of that. But I think there's a ton of value that comes from leaders who are more mature in their career stage. And I think it's really learning how to tell a narrative and tell a story around that. That experience, that maturity, that accumulation really matters. And in some industries, this can be, I think, more well received or more challenging, right? In industries where there's a massive rate of change, it can be more challenging if people feel like, well, that experience isn't relevant anymore. But I think it's just getting really, really clear on, I think it was Allison's question, really clear, Allison, on like, what are your strengths? What is the value that you bring? Having that clarity and that confidence around it, and getting really, really crystal clear about the value that you're bringing, and really framing it as like a business case to the organization, right? Here's what I'm going to deliver. Here's how I'm going to impact the business. Here's what you can expect from me. So it just becomes an exercise in really crafting your personal value, your personal narrative around really your elevator pitch for how you can impact an organization.
All right, we also have a question from Joanna. How do you discover your transferable skills and then talk about them without sounding like it's a reach?
Oh yeah, interesting. So, and I'm saying this is interesting because in some ways, I don't know that it's that much different than just getting really clear on what your skills are in general, right? So really getting clear on, hey, what am I exceptional at? What are my experiences? And thinking about it across a few different sort of lenses, right? Like there's your functional expertise, whatever that might be, right? I'm great at creative ad copy, or I'm great at financial models. There's the industry expertise that you have, right? I've worked in growth stage organizations, I've worked in tech, I've worked in whatever. And then there's sort of your leadership style, like I've managed a team of X, or I've, experienced a reorganization or a merger, or any of these kind of leadership things that you've witnessed and experienced. So I really would do a broad exercise. Like, I don't think you need to start with transferable. You just need to document your skills. What are your skills and experiences? And then, if sometimes that alone can make it really apparent. Oh yeah, like this would be very valuable. If you still feel stuck, I would think about where you're trying to head, right? Like look at a job description. What are the skills and experiences that you see pop up there? And it's really a mirroring and a matching activity. But I find that I think the trickier part, my instinct and experience says the trickier part is less about identifying the transferable ones and more about just really taking the time to get clear and honest and maximize how you articulate your skill set. And then I think mapping it is actually a little bit more intuitive. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and I'll add that when you start to do that mapping, sometimes you'll actually see a very common thread or a theme, and that's where you can start to see that idea of a transferable skill across all the different experiences that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I just realized I saw the second part, how do you talk about them without sounding like it's a reach? And I think here you want to communicate from a place of leadership and a place of confidence. And you want to have the narrative down. You don't want to act like there's no shift or no pivot or no gap, right? You don't want to act like, you've been to the party when you haven't. And you want to act like, well, I've been to a lot of other parties and I feel really good about showing up to this one, right? So like really finding that narrative of, hey, here's why I think that this is, a really valuable transition, right? I've been in this industry perhaps, right? But I've seen a lot of the same shifts and a lot of the same challenges that I know your industry is experiencing today, like X and Y and Z. And so that's how I'm going to be able to help. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say to that, and I think it was Joanna, is oftentimes the hardest person to convince is yourself. So get to a point where you feel really good and you feel really confident in the answer, and that's going to come through.
Yes, great. And looks like the last question is, can you share an example of a career pivot that didn't go as planned and what that person learned from the experience?
Yeah. There were several people who I collected and interviewed for the book, and that didn't go as they planned, right? And didn't really reach their objective or reach their goal. I saw this a lot with people who were pursuing entrepreneurial ventures, right? Because these are the ones where there's a real indicator of like, this, did this work? Did it not? Right? There's almost that binary or very clear signal or indicator of this working or not working. So it came up a lot with people who were pursuing something entrepreneurial, both in terms of launching a true, business at scale, and also women who were leaving corporate and launching more solopreneur type businesses. And here's what I'll say is almost all women found something really, really valuable in that sort of leap, even if it didn't work out as they intended. And so a few examples of what that looks like, right? There were women who, really realized like, hey, solopreneurship, it's not for me, and had more clarity, more confidence, and honestly, more gratitude and more satisfaction in returning to a more traditional employer and a more traditional, whether it be corporate or organizational, right? So sometimes it really is like, hey, I wanted to test something, and I go back, and there's still a ton of value in getting clear on that. It's experimentation, and it might work and it might not, but it's still gratifying to feel like, okay, well, I scratched that itch, right? So even scratching that itch, if it doesn't work out, it's like, there's some value in that. Another really universal experience, even for people who it quote unquote didn't work out, is this massive shift in empowerment, this massive unlocking of what they feel is possible for them. Like they did it, and actually the quote unquote worst thing happened. It didn't work out, and they realized they're totally okay. Right? They found their way back to some other shore or some other thing. And then suddenly this blocker that holds us back from so much, this fear of what if it failed, it loses so much power because it did. And they were okay. And they learned how to navigate it. And so that, I would say, is one of the most powerful transformations for people, whether it works or not, is this feeling of, I did it. It worked out or it didn't. And in either case, and especially if it didn't work out, I know that I can do it again.
Yeah, it's all about learning from that experience, whether it's a success or even more so in times of failure. It's learning from that experience and iterating on that to move forward. So yeah, love that it's the times of failure that loses that power of the fear of failing. So because you've gone through it once and it wasn't so bad.
Yeah. And I'll add to maybe one last comment, which is just around there's risk in never taking a risk, right? We have this perception that, hey, if we stay where we are, there's no risk. And there is. And we're all experiencing, many people are experiencing that now in today's market economy too. So there's no way to completely eliminate risk, right? So even if you're staying where you are, that's just something to keep in mind as well as you're kind of making these calculations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the idea of, yeah, you think you're in a stable career or where things haven't changed, but I think what they say is the change is always constant. So there's always going to be some change, whether you expect it or not. And being able to recover from that is important. And learning from those experiences, I think, is equally as important, whether it's a success or a failure or a setback. So, all right, it looks like we've covered all the questions. Thank you again, Jess, for your time, for sharing your thoughts with us, sharing more about the conversation and the topics. And thank you to everyone who's joined. SAM is launching on April 27th. We're really excited. It's at the end of this month, so less than 30 days. And you'll find Jess on SAM when we launch. And so look for more updates in the coming weeks as we share more about SAM's launch, as well as more experts. And stay tuned for more chapters on Pull Me Out of This as we get them scheduled. You can find more information on Pull Me Out of This at pullmeoutofthis.com. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Alice. Thanks, everyone. Great to be in conversation with all of you.